Could you imagine living in, or rather on, I should say, a houseboat? I recently saw this video about a woman in Toronto, Kate Fincham, who decided to do exactly that. She actually bought her houseboat, which has a square footage of 625, for $343,000 Canadian, converted from the $250,000 US in the title of the original video, and that was not too long ago in 2020. But apparently, she also had to do a ton of renovations to get it as beautiful as it is now. And it looks pretty livable, don't you think? Open concept with a loft bed above the main living area. And she's not the only one. There's also Stuart Galloway, who lives on a boat in Toronto Harbor. This one, the Norvik one, which used to be a ferry, is quite large at 1,700 square foot.
A lot less than buying a condo or a house in the city right now.
Yeah, I would say so, for sure.
And he's also done a ton of renovations to make it comfortable. And also this couple, Jennifer Golden and Chris Arnold, who moved out of their large house in Kitchener, Ontario, onto this 38-foot cruiser yacht in Penetanguishene, Ontario, with their kids, dogs, and cats.
It's like an RV, but it's bigger.
And what all of these people have in common is that they were either paying exorbitant rent or a very expensive mortgage and were looking for alternative, affordable housing options that they could truly enjoy without breaking the bank. But living on a houseboat while offering a really refreshing kind of lifestyle also comes with a lot of challenges, especially in the winters, and we'll talk about that later. So I got really curious about houseboat living. What do houseboats cost? What are the monthly costs of owning a houseboat? And is it really worth it? And let me know in the comments below, would you live on a houseboat? Why and why not? Or the better question would probably be, at what price point would living on a houseboat become an attractive option to you? When we're talking about homes on water, there are actually two different types. There's the floating home, which looks just like a regular home, with standard ceiling heights, just on the water instead of on land. They don't have an engine and would need to be moved around by other boats. Houseboats, on the other hand, are usually much smaller and look more like, well, boats. And they have propulsion systems with an engine, so they can easily move from one marina to the other. One example of a floating home community is near the Scarborough Bluffs community. And shout out to this YouTuber here, My Little Hobby, who took these awesome drone shots. Wow, there are at least 20 of them. And it seems there is a mix of floating homes and houseboats here, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to call them houseboats. And there are many more places in Canada where houseboats are docked, including Bluffers Park Marina, where you'll find some of the more luxurious houseboats, also in the east, in Vancouver Fisherman's Wharf. Just look at those bright colors. And Yellowknife Bay, far up in the Northwestern Territories. And I actually wanted to know how many Canadians permanently live on houseboats, but unfortunately there are no detailed statistics on this. But here's what I found to make my own guesstimate. StatCan did a census on types of dwelling, where they found that about 64% of Canadians live in some sort of house, 34% in apartments, and 1.3% in movable dwellings and mobile homes. So of an approximately 39 million population, that's about 500,000 people. And if we made a really wild guess and say that 1% of those are living on houseboats, then we'd arrive at 5,000 people. And I could imagine that with the rise in housing prices all over Canada, houseboating could probably become more popular in the future. And if you're even remotely interested in this kind of lifestyle, you can actually try it out for a few days, as there are many people, among others on Airbnb, who rent out houseboats for people on vacation. How much does it actually cost to live on a houseboat? Because the last thing you want to do is switching out a super high mortgage or rent for another housing alternative that is just as unaffordable. In any case, if you're planning to buy a home, whether that's regular or a houseboat, let's say in 3 to 5 years, you'll probably need to save up a lot of money. And if you don't need access to the money now, it's better to invest it so that money can grow. And if you want to be on the safer side, you can even just put that money into a high interest savings account or a cash account. And by the time you're ready to buy your house, that money will have grown. Just don't leave your money in a regular checkings account. And nowadays, it's so easy to start investing, even for beginners, by signing up to an online investment platform like Wealthsimple. I've been using Wealthsimple for over 3 years now, and I love it because it's just so user-friendly, especially for beginners. And a big plus, Wealthsimple does not charge any commission fees for either buying or selling stocks and ETFs. If you want to try it out, you can use my referral link in the descriptions down below, and once your account is funded, both you and I will each get a bonus of $25. Now let's get to the costs. How much does it actually cost to own a houseboat? There are two cost components, as is the case with a regular home. First, the cost of buying the houseboat itself, and second, the monthly cost of owning it. Now let's look at houseboat prices first. Houseboat and floating home prices vary a lot, starting anywhere from $150,000 and $400,000 and going all the way up. If we go to this site here, boatdealers.ca, you will see that some houseboats are selling for very cheap, in the $20,000, like this 35 feet long houseboat. But it's not really in prime condition, and it will take a ton of work and money to make it enjoyable. This one at $169,000 is slightly better, but it still needs work. Now this one here costs $375,000, and it's a slightly more livable condition, but still needs a major update if you ask me. So if you add on those renovations, depending on your need and taste of course, that can quickly add up to the price of a one-bedroom condo. And of course, there's also an upscale market for houseboats and floating homes. I present to you Toronto Floating Homes. No, this is not sponsored by them, but they do have beautiful houseboats. Like this 650 square foot bright houseboat, loving the interior by the way, which sells for $490,000. And this one here, a 55 feet long houseboat. Almost everything looks awesome. This one costs $649,000. And well, at this price, at least I am way past the point where I would prefer a houseboat over a conventional home. Personally, I would still prefer a small townhouse or a 2-bedroom condo outside the city. But if you think that this is your thing, then go for it. On average, houseboats are still much more affordable, especially if you compare them to detached homes. But there is one big problem. You can't really get a traditional mortgage to buy a houseboat. But not that there's no financing at all. Although it's a bit more difficult to find, there are lenders who give out boat loans. Houseboat buyers like Kate Fincham earlier saved up 90% of the houseboat price and then borrowed the remaining 10% from family. Scott Galloway bought his houseboat for very cheap, but then over the years spent a lot of money as well on renovations. It's been over 5 years in the making, and it's an ongoing renovation project with the help of family and friends. And what about the monthly costs? So her monthly costs are $1,450 which is almost $2,000 Canadian. That's actually a lot.
My most expensive monthly cost is my mooring fee, which includes my slip here at the dock, access to hydro, water, septic pump out, my mail, and also my parking.
Okay, so this actually includes the loan that she took from family, $362 per month. So if we exclude that, the monthly cost would be $1,500, which is still a lot. The largest chunk is actually the mooring fee, which is $732 or almost $1,000 Canadian. I wouldn't have thought that it's so expensive. A mooring fee is paid to a marina or dock for the right to anchor or dock the houseboat at their facilities. And how much the mooring fee is will, among others, depend on the location. So her boat being docked in Toronto, you can imagine the mooring fee to be much more expensive. So if you're like me, you're probably a bit hesitant to switch to a houseboat. And hearing the stories of Kate, Scott, and the others, living on a houseboat doesn't come without challenges, especially in the winters.
My drain pipes freeze twice. I had some issues with my water. I was trying to figure out my process for making sure that ice didn't freeze around my houseboat, which you use kind of little underwater fans called bubblers for. It was a learning curve, but it wasn't anything that put me off houseboat life at all.
And there's also some tricky maintenance that comes with it.
You do need to maintain the exterior, and being on the water sometimes it's a little harder on the exterior of the houseboat, but the only real maintenance is the pontoons. So I do have to get taken out of the water every 2 to 3 years to maintain the pontoons and make sure there's no areas that are rusting, and if there are, sanding them down and repainting the pontoon.
And then there's also a problem with Wi-Fi, which according to Jennifer and Chris is quite spotty. Not great if you depend on high-speed internet internet to upload a 1 gigabyte video. And another thing that bothers me is the uncertainty about the rights and laws surrounding houseboat living. At least it seems to me to be this way, judging from this news piece where a bunch of houseboaters got evicted from Mosquito Creek Marina in North Vancouver.
What money I had left, I put in to buy this place.
She bought this boat shed at Mosquito Creek Marina in North Vancouver. Dozens of residents have converted the floating structures into homes. But on Wednesday, she was handed what amounts to an eviction notice. A letter sent to hundreds of residents said the marina docks reached their end of serviceable life and that they will need to permanently close the marina docks. The hundreds of people who live on boats and in boat sheds here have to leave by May 31st.
I've just realizing that with that notice, where do I move? A $500,000 property. You can't move a float home anywhere. I'm going to walk away from this place with my 2 dogs and my bird and be left penniless on the street.
So before you move to a houseboat, make sure that you really understand the rules and regulations surrounding it. I'd also say that it takes a certain type of personality to want to do this. Perhaps much more adventurous, unlike me, and willing to go through a lot of hassle to make it work. And then there's the cost. It's not obvious to me that houseboat living is actually cheaper than conventional housing. It really comes down to the price of the boat and how many renovations you need to make it livable to you, and the location, which affects the mooring fee. Well, houseboat living is not for everyone, and that's perhaps a good thing. If everyone decided to live on a houseboat, then it would become overcrowded and not as idyllic anymore.
I would say it's probably the best decision I ever made. I would also recommend not to do it because I don't want too many neighbors.
If after watching this video you think that you'd rather stick to a good old house but just can't afford the crazy prices in the big city, check out this video where I count down the cheapest cities to buy a home in. Guys, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are about houseboat living. Would you do it or not? Why and why not? I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you pretty soon in the next video. Bye!